There's no doubt that data-driven strategies, innovative coaching approaches, and strong institutional partnerships are reshaping how colleges and universities seek to empower their faculty, grow their programs, and achieve meaningful and lasting outcomes these days. So, how do we as coaches and advisors help our higher ed clients make better data-driven decisions while also affecting some meaningful and sustainable programmatic change that also accounts for the needs of diverse academic and non-academic stakeholders? If you're interested in these questions, you've come to the right place. Hi, I'm Tim Jansa, a leadership and organizational development coach, and your host for Coaching in Higher Education, the go-to podcast for coaching professionals and those interested in coaching at colleges and universities. Continuing our focus on public-private partnerships in season 2 of the podcast, it is a real pleasure to be joined today by two outstanding professionals. Dr. Andrea Marcinkus is a Senior Director of Research and Insights, and Dr. Wijeratne serves as Director of Academic Services, both of them at Boundless Learning, a global higher education services and EdTech company that helps colleges, universities, associations, and other institutions build, launch, and manage data-driven online learning programs. So, let's see what insights they can offer us about the real-world challenges of supporting institutions to develop meaningful online programs, the balance between academic mission and market reality, and proven approaches for coaches and advisors seeking to make the greatest possible impact. Andrea, Aaron, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for taking time to share your expertise across 16 time zones this time.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
So before we dig into your work with your higher ed clients, I'd love our audience to learn a little bit more about your background, especially since both of you transitioned from academic roles to leadership and program strategy in the private sector. So Andrea, let's start with you. What motivated those shifts for you, and what lessons have you learned in academia that now inform your current work?
Sure. So I started in academia as an adjunct professor, I think as many folks start, moved to full-time tenure track professor, and then shifted over to administration. And I love that work because of how it impacted the students in a much larger way. I was a cross-campus director of student retention, moved then to become the Dean of Academic Affairs and Chief Academic Officer for that same 5-campus group before I joined Pearson Online Learning Services, which then became Boundless Learning. But I think some of the things that have carried across from my time in academia is always maintaining a student first sort of mentality. For me, at the end of the day, it's about helping students succeed. I also have carried across this higher ed perspective. The people that we work with, I was them not too long ago. And so I really understand what they're going through. I've been faculty, so I understand what they've been going through. And I understand how difficult it is to sometimes navigate the pace and the bureaucracy at many institutions. And also institutions that are associated with them, things like accrediting bodies and that kind of thing. So everything that I do is sort of comes forth with those things in mind.
So for me, I guess in a very similar vein, I probably noticed a shifting sands with the way in which higher education was going. I was lucky in the fact that post-PhD, I moved into a variety of adjunct roles. And those roles required developing courses that were traditionally developed face-to-face and moving them to online. It was about 10 years ago that I sort of moved away from your traditional public universities into a private institution. This private institution was one of the first here in Australia to offer distance education, which now has become Australia's largest online MBA and deliver into North America, into the UK, Europe, etc. there. That was just prior to my time of transitioning to Pearson Online Learning Services. So that was 6 years ago. And I think one of the things that has stood with me throughout that process is that focus on the learner. I think whether you're looking at public or private higher education institutions, and even from the corporate perspective, it is the learner that is the focus. It's where we put all our efforts, right from recruiting them all the way through to the academic delivery side of things, is if you don't put that focus on the student, then you've lost everything. So I think that's one of the things that you sort of notice throughout this process is that, well, look, those that don't put the learner first have a tough time recruiting them nowadays. So
I love that, Aaron, that you said learner first, and Andrea also, with your experience on you said student first, student success. Because in my experience, so many external providers of services, especially like online learning, they seem to be in it really just to sell their product, get it out there, and then they leave the institutions and the faculty basically sometimes holding the bag of poop and trying to make it work and make it happen. Would you say that your student-focused experience and lifelong focus on students would really give you an edge in that particular space?
Well, I think so. I know that at Boundless Learning, we have always been student first, and we can boast some statistics like a 95% retention rate for the programs that we fully manage, which is really something. And that's because we do take the time and care to put the student at the center. I know a lot of times students are seen as, the recipients of the education, but they're also the product too. The end goal is to getting students to complete. And if you aren't set up in order to help students and meet them where they are, then the ROI doesn't make sense on the business end because your client and your product are not there.
And I think that's the thing. Like, I think from a lot of institutions, they see like corporates like us, the external parties, as the dark side. But at the end of the day, and I know this is one of the things that it potentially becomes a dirty word within institutions, is the idea of a customer and that customer-centric mentality. Our society is customer-centric, and that's what education also needs to be. But when you're looking at the learner first perspective, you need to have that understanding of what the learner's going through, not just in your old traditional brick and mortar institutions, but more so in that online environment where it is so isolating. If you don't put the learner first, don't put the customer first, that's where you will lose them. So, and that's something we've embodied across not just our time at Boundless Learning, but I think when we were at Pearson Still, is that it was very much part of our DNA that the student is at the center of everything we do, from when Andrea is doing the research and working out what programs are going to sort of be appealing to the market, versus all the way through to the academic delivery. We have a 95% retention rate, but like when we do delivery here in Australia, we've got also a 95% student satisfaction rate. So you're seeing that quality go all the way through as well.
Aaron, you mentioned the dark side just now, because that is something that is a theme that seems to be popping up whenever we bring up public-private partnership or any kind of external vendors. And I've talked to so many faculty and so many administrators who are very, very skeptical when it comes to working with outside vendors, even though they do all the time. I mean, think about even like food services on campus, that's an external vendor. So all of those things, how do you break through that? What's your selling point?
I don't know whether it's necessarily a selling point, but it's getting them to trust us and build that rapport with them. I think in any context, the relationship needs to come first. The third party interaction is a strategic alliance. You're there to solve a problem that the institution cannot solve for themselves. So if you're not in an alliance together, working towards a common goal, that's where a lot of these partnerships struggle. And I think when you look at the history of a lot of OPM relationships, is that you get that buy-in up top from the key decision makers, but it doesn't flow through, and that's where the problems lie.
And I think also our approach is a little different too. When we start by listening. We listen to their problems from the very first conversations. They might ask what we do, right? And what exactly is a OPM or what kind of services we provide. But we start those conversations by really listening and not prescribing. We want to know their culture, their pressures, their history, right? So when we really listen, we really uncover the root of the issues behind some of the problems that they're having. whether that's enrollment challenges, lack of insights to the data that they might have, retention gaps, or need to grow new programs. And I think that that really builds trust, because we are looking, as Erin said, to build relationships, and not just the ROI at the end of the day, although that's also important for sure.
Well, the relationship building is so essential, also any kind of coaching relationship, as you know, and we'll definitely talk a little bit more about the coaching aspect of this. But I'm so glad you brought this up, because I think for any kind of good service provider, that includes us as coaches or any kind of advisors, to build that trust and to establish the relationship and really try to understand your client and their real pain points, and not just bring any kind of cookie cutter solution. It's absolutely essential. So I'm really glad, you're both mentioning this. So Andrea, let's talk about data for a second, because
Okay.
as I mentioned, so many people are now talking about data-driven decision making. And I be honest, I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with that, because sometimes I think it goes to the level where data and just numbers drive everything, but not so much the student needs and the relationships, and what the actual tangible learning outcomes are or need to be for an institution to be successful. So could you give us a little bit of a description of how data-driven decision-making can transform academic program success and institutional growth, and how your work helps accomplish that?
Sure. Well, I think at the end of the day, a lot of times we start with our like a hunch of what can solve something, or you might have a very clear viewpoint on maybe how to solve the problem, or even what the problem might be. But when you start to add in data into the conversation, you move from that state of intuition to a state of clarity. And when you use things like market data, learner data, and performance data all together, they can make decisions that are really both strategic and also sustainable. So things like programs can become better aligned with actual real demand. A lot of the things that we tend to look at are search volume data, and also answer engine data or generative engine data now, to really help to understand what learners are thinking about, what they're searching, and some of those trend data from that side, to make sure that programs have real demand. And we also look at employer trend data, which is really important to see where job skills are moving to. We know that students are more inclined today to be more ROI focused than they ever have in the past. And so we want to make sure that the programs that we are building, designing, helping provide faculty with research for are really aligned with market needs, so that those students can graduate, find meaningful employment, and then have a great experience at the university, so they come back and become lifelong learners. And then that also ties in a little bit with where institutional strategy becomes more future focused instead of reactionary. So data also brings an evidence that helps you see patterns and trends, and you can make decisions faster, communicate those decisions more consistently, and really invest in areas that have the highest impact. And because of that, it allows you to model some new modalities, things like maybe micro-credentials, or embedding stackable pathways into programs. And maybe it's not all programs, maybe it's certain programs. But in short, that data doesn't just replace human judgment. It really helps to sharpen it and focus it. Mm-hmm. And that's when we're all working from this data to help informed decisions. It moves from data to insight. And I think that that's the important thing.
Please pardon the interruption. This is your friendly reminder that if you're enjoying today's episode, to please click like and to subscribe to the podcast. Your support is really important to us. Also, please check out the companion website, higheredcoaching.us or leadershipimagined.com/podcast. Thanks so much, And now back to the episode. Aaron, since you're more faculty facing, I can hear faculty in my ear already saying, well, market focused ROIs, data driven decision making, that to some in certain areas is certainly something that I think just raises the hairs at the back of their neck. Aaron, how do you work with faculty then to make sure that they understand what it means and what the impact can be?
And that is one of the biggest challenges, because academics are resistant to any business talk. All right. So during those initial program discussions and those exploration sessions, it's about getting them to understand. Okay, these are the areas that are going to be successful for them moving forward. All right. They've often got programs that are very near and dear to them. Right. They don't want to see the ownership of the program being taken out of their hands. And really, it's not. All right. We are just looking at what programs are going to be like relevant in the market in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And that's what we want. We want long-term success for our partners. And it's getting to them and getting them to understand that this is about their success as an academic as well, their ability to lead that program through to growth. And getting back to what we initially spoke about, they're not going to be attractive to the learner if there's no job prospects. And that's one of the things that Andrea had flagged as well.
Would you say that your background as faculty and administrators gives you the tools to, and the language skills to express these things in terms that faculty and administrators will understand better?
100%. We don't come from like a sales background or anything like that. So I think both Aaron and I are both academics at heart. And I think that comes across when we meet academics and administration at the college and university level. I mean, they see us as fellows, right? Because we are, still publishing, we're researching. We might have some dollars attached down the line that somebody else will help us out with, but we really are genuinely wanting the best for the students and to prepare the future of the workforce.
So, Aaron, you already touched on this a little bit when you talked about your work with faculty, kind of overcoming some of those some of that resistance. So, what are some maybe more coaching oriented challenges when you're working with faculty and maybe really kind of reluctant adopters of new instructional practices and technologies, especially with faculty? They're so focused on their competence and they just want to have total and complete ownership, also intellectual property ownership of that. So how do you do that?
You have to start by getting to the root issue. Okay. And I think this is often one of two reasons. It's confidence. All right. They don't want to be shown that they don't have the requisite skills and knowledge in a particular area. Or it's the identity side of things. And look, those two things are probably interlinked, but you're probably looking at two ends of the spectrum in I guess, experience from academics. A lot of academics don't go through formal education training moving into their teaching roles. Our training is generally very much research-based. So once we're able to connect around those aspects, it's sort of getting them to understand that we're not here to say, you're not doing this right, or you're doing this wrong, or the way you've been teaching historically is incorrect. But what it is about getting them to understand that this is not a challenge to the threat of quality or identity or their own, I guess, sense of self, but it is about instilling them with the skills and capabilities needed for the future. And I think this is particularly more true in the online space. Teaching in an online space is completely different to face-to-face settings. It requires a different skill set. And that's one of the things that we sort of frame up, is that this is a different skill set designed for the online environment. It's going to help your face-to-face practice, but it's very much designed to sort of move through and move through the entire process from course design to delivery.
Andrea, you mentioned student success coaching.
Yeah.
What does that look like? And can you describe that a little bit?
Sure. Well, let me go back a little bit into my background at the university before I joined Boundless Learning, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we do at Boundless. In my background, I was the cross-campus director of student retention. And that sounds like a really boring job title. But in actuality, what it means is helping students succeed. And so there I took a data first approach, and we took a look at what were things that were actually preventing students from succeeding. So, graduating with a B or better, or passing a course with a B or better, eventually graduating within 4 to 5 years at the undergraduate level, things like that. And one of the things that we were finding was that the barriers were very infrequently academic barriers. They were life barriers, or not knowing how to navigate the university system barriers. We had a lot of first generation students. And I can really sympathize with that as well. I'm a first generation college student myself. So we hired some coaches, some student coaches that instead of going to your academic advisor who would, help you through your major, you could go and talk to a life coach to help you navigate living on your own. Sometimes it might even be things like affording groceries or that kind of thing. We've uncovered all these reasons that were preventing students from succeeding academically. And one of the things that I really love about Boundless Learning is that our student coaches, our student success coaches, take that very same approach. They help to break down those barriers and not necessarily solve the students' problems for them, but get them in touch with resources at the institution or outside of the institution that can help break down those barriers that are preventing them from succeeding academically.
No, and I think that's the thing, is that from a student success perspective, being able to coach the student through the tough times of that online degree. I said before, it's very isolating for those students. So being able to talk to someone that's going to help them mitigate these issues, that's not their academic, is something somewhat comforting. All right, they don't want the academic to have the wrong experience or impression of them. So having that other support mechanism is vital in these spaces. I think when you look at student support or student success on an on-campus environment, it's generally a long line of students just wanting to change their schedules. It's not the range of services that are offered, and I think that's one of the things in the online environment. It's a vital success metric that we see to help the students get through those first few courses once they've started their degree.
I have to say I'm really impressed by your very holistic approach to the kind of transformation work that you do, and you're really treating this as an ecosystem. And it's not just the technology ecosystem or the data ecosystem, but also the people, because ultimately this serves the educational advancement and fortification of people. And if they're not ready to learn for whatever reason, it could be issues of equity. You mentioned first gen students, sometimes low socioeconomic students, just not knowing how to navigate a campus environment, especially when they first come in. There's so many stressors that make it impossible a lot of times for students to even fully dedicate themselves to the learning, because they're just spending so much energy just trying to navigate their environment. In the online program management work that you're doing, what are some coaching issues or topics that keep popping up where whether it's faculty, whether it's administrators who are tasked with implementing or want to implement these innovations, where they're stuck, where they really need some help with coaching? Aaron.
So I think from the faculty perspective, there's been a huge focus on AI related issues, particularly in managing AI assessment integrity, how they redesign their assessments, how they refine their curriculum. They don't have time, and this is getting back to the workload issue. They don't have time to reinvent the entire curriculum, but how do they AI proof it for the future cohorts? And that's one of the things we've spent a lot of time doing with numbers of faculty, because it really is getting to the point where They want to adjust. They want to be able to respond. They don't have the time and space to change their entire course. They can't because of traditional administrative processes anyway. So it's working through the tactics and strategies to allow them to do that.
To slowly start wrapping things up, even though there is so much more to unpack, honestly, if you were to say what makes great coaching in the OPM space, especially keeping, and I'm here, pardon the little pun here, keeping an eye on AI and kind of the future of education, what would that be?
Yeah.
What makes great coaching and successful coaches?
So it's about designing coaching experiences that build capacity and confidence. So to do this, they need to personalize the coaching path, start with the faculty member or administrator's context, their workload, their current skills, and their teaching goals. Then you need to get to the sort of the modeling and best practice and show what good online teaching or administration actually is, and then guide them through that rehearsal before delivery or implementation. And then the final element is providing that online support. It's not one-off workshops. It's not a training delivery. It is a constant connection, and that's where true coaching comes from. It's been able to combine that micro-learning, short coaching cycle, review, feedback, and rinse and repeat again, so that people are actually building that capability and skill and reflecting on it, because something someone learns very early on, they may not realize the full outcomes till 6-12 months later, and want to reconnect. So that's one of the things we've built into our coaching programs, that they can always come and connect with a coach once they've gone through the program, because it's not just a short one-off period.
I'm going to go back to that piece that I said about asking the right questions before offering solutions. I think that is so critical, because a lot of times, even academics think that they know what the questions are, and it's until you start to dig and sort of peel back those layers of the onion that you really help to understand what the true problems are. And then I would also say that the discussions that you have to be really honest, and they should be mission anchored. We've talked a lot about talking about the learner, but I think maybe equally as important, as a distinction between different universities out there, is what their missions are. And I think that we have to be honest towards what each individual university's mission is and their vision. And there's students out there for all of them. And then I also want to touch on the piece about how emotional academics, not academics as people, but the academic process can be. And to acknowledge that, because when I think a lot of the sticking points where you get abrasive faculty or faculty unwilling to change is because you don't acknowledge the fact that they are emotionally tied to their discipline, what they're researching, and all of that. And I know that has always helped me, from that perspective, when you're faced with some of that stickiness, is to, really empathize and really acknowledge that it's an emotional attachment to their work, their life's work, and to show how you are adding to it rather than trying to take away from it.
I love that, because it kind of brings us full circle to the question of identity, and so much of a faculty member's identity is just rooted in their subject matter expertise and their publication record, their research. And as soon as you start coming in and touching that, it's an extremely sensitive issue. So that also then explains. Aaron, you're laughing. It seems like that's happened to you a lot of times.
It has, and I think once you get through that identity, that emotional connection they have with that identity, it's a lot easier that they see that you're in it for the same purpose. Like, there's a lot of academics we've dealt with, and some disciplines are a lot harder to deal with, because they have a stronger identity associated with their discipline. And once you bridge that, you build that connection, you're able to work with them, not only in defining what the programs are, but you build that relationship so that you coach them through those various aspects of the online delivery, development, implementation, etc. So you're building their skills for the future.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And also, I'm so glad, Andrea, you brought up the mission, because, a lot of times the institutional mission isn't necessarily shared with faculty or with individual departments. They kind of each have a different idea of what this mission means. So for us as coaches, or at least professionals with a coaching component that is part of our service delivery, that we're kind of help them come back to what the mission actually is, of what they're trying to accomplish, is, I think that's super important. And also, Aaron, what you described earlier, the way you talked about building capacity and confidence to model best practices, to maintain these constant connections, that really is agile coaching in the way that I was trained as an agile coach. So it's not your typical, let's say, standard ICF style coaching, but you really have to meet your client where they are and look at what their needs are at that particular moment, and then just address them. It could be a little more directive, maybe a little more training and mentoring and support, or it could be, some pure coaching where it's just asking high level questions.
Yeah, and look, that's the thing. People need different coaching approaches. There are some that want that traditional ICF approach, but I think with a lot of academics, you can't go in and just implement a coaching framework.
Yeah.
You need to be agile. They're all different. They're all coming from different backgrounds and experiences, and you need to honor that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, any final thoughts on this topic that you would like to share with our audience?
Oh, gosh. I just want to say, from maybe perhaps from a data perspective, is anytime you work with data, is you always want to start with the question first. And so I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning. And so I encourage everybody, no matter what kind of data you're looking at, is to think like a researcher and start with those questions.
I think from my perspective, and we've spoken about this common thread throughout these conversations, is the importance of the human in everything we do in higher education moving forward. I think to some point, with all the transformation and change that happens in our industry, we forget about the humans in that process, and this is where the coaching and capability uplift comes into it. We need to spend more time training, developing, mentoring, and leading our academic and professional staff, because, look, in the future, they are going to be the leaders of these organizations, and they need to have the skills and capabilities to do that. We don't want to get to a point where, and a lot of corporates have a gap in leadership potential and capability. We want to ensure that that's addressed within higher education, so that you've got strong leaders at the top of these institutions. So
beautifully said, Aaron. Thank you so much. As I like to say, words to live, lead, and coach by. And I think that kind of summarizes everything. So listen, thank you both so very much for making time. Aaron, for you, it's in the morning. Andrea, for you and me, it's late in the afternoon. And have a wonderful rest of your evening and of your day, Aaron. Thank you again. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your wisdom. And I really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having us.
And to you, our audience, thank you for spending some time with us today as well. I hope you found this conversation at least as insightful as I have. As always, if you're interested in more information on this episode, our guests, and today's topic, please visit our companion website, higheredcoaching.us or leadershipimagined.com/podcast. And if you have not yet had the opportunity to watch any of the 16 episodes of Season 1, I encourage you to click on the playlist link below. See you soon, and until next time, keep making a difference, one client and one conversation at a time. Take care.